Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everybody, welcome to my guide for Muzen Cop, whose name is almost always shortened to AMC, and that's how I'll refer to him from here on in. AMC is the glass cannon of the hunter class, having no movement abilities to speak of, but having by far and away the most consistent and potent stim out of any hunter. In terms of builds though, AMC doesn't need to hyperfix on being an all-out basic attack character, as his abilities, especially his ultimate, pack an enormous wallop when built more power-oriented. And that's how he's played right now, specifically in the mid lane role. In the ADC role, however, he hasn't been seen for a little while, but I'd wager to guess either this crit build or this penetration or attack speed build is more suitable. Relics wise, yeah, it's just beads and Aegis, no two ways about it. Beads and Shell is a solid choice as well, the Shell of course enabling to more safely take trades with, well, everyone, but the beads Aegis is as ever the old reliable. Speaking of reliable, AMC's passive. Now this is largely reliant on his other abilities, but here's a quick rundown. AMC's abilities infest all hit enemies with bees. Other enemies who get close to another enemy inflicted with bees will have bees inflicted on them too. It doesn't do super high damage or anything, but it's free damage just for using your abilities. Plus, basic attacking on an enemy who has bees on them will refresh the bee's duration on that target. So, even more damage. Yummy. Speaking of yummy, AMC's first ability. AMC places down a hive. This hive is a deployable which acts as a very short range ward, but dies in just one basic attack hit. And AMC is able to place up to 7 of these hives, which sounds like a lot, but trust me, it'll rack up quickly. And while you can obviously overlap these AoEs, you won't get double the bonus effects for sitting in just 2 hives at once, which is a good thing, since the hive creates this huge AoE which grants AMC movement speed, attack speed, and a constant heal on top of that. So yeah, that's the best stim in the game right there. But clearly it's a risk-reward. The reward part is obvious, but the risk comes from all that greatness, as well as your only form of additional movement speed being torn down all just by one measly basic attack from any enemy onto that hive. So this means that despite being a limited AoE range, you need to place the hive itself in a safe position to ensure you're always getting the benefits of the AoE. Needless to say, you want to be placing the hive as often as possible, keep the entire area you're in to be your stomping ground. And not to mention, you do typically want to do this in the jungle as well, so you can use the ward effect, but this isn't super helpful or anything, just put it in little choke points. This includes using this ability preemptively before teamfights too. Now, of course, you don't want to just be plopping this in front of yourself, you want to be placing it directly behind walls, but you want to place them as frequently as possible and essentially around every corner where you intend on fighting. Your hives will die. So despite an average cooldown on this ability, you need to place these ahead of time in order to be effective 100% of the time in fights. Now I doubt I need to tell you this, but you can't cover the entire map with these hives, so you'll need to place them on the fly while retreating or chasing, but this itself is very self-explanatory. Just look for the closest wall to plop one of them over and that's just fine. Just don't aim it directly in front of yourself and it's fine. The opposite is true for AMC's second ability. AMC fires a projectile in a straight line which deals damage to all enemies and applies as passive. Really, this ability is very simple. You slap it on the wave in the early and mid game, use it mid combo during the early and mid game, and forget about it late game other than for finishing off targets over walls since its damage falls off harder than Chance the Rapper. Not to mention, this neat little basic attack cancel combo becomes much less effective once you get more attack speed too, since his 2 really just starts getting outclassed by his simple basic attacks. So it's still a great tool while laning, as I'm sure you can tell. It staggers away for you so you can apply your actually high damaging ability, your third ability. AMC primes himself to dispense honey to the AoE in front of him, and AMC can cancel out of this ability if he has yet to dispense any. AMC can then activate this ability and look around on the ground to paint a trail of honey. This honey slows enemies. Yeah, this ability is not very good unless you have a hive nearby, so if you cast any part of this ability in an AoE of a hive, the honey will deal high damage over time and apply his passive on top of that, while still slowing. Alternatively, you can activate the honey by shooting your second ability over, but of course this is more done in times of desperation when you don't have access to a hive, or specifically at level 2 in the early game. This ability will only deal this damage over time to any enemies actually in the honey, it won't trail them out of the honey. So this is AMC's actual wave clear ability and his only form of CC in his entire kit outside of his ultimate, and it's measly slow. The damage on this is still formidable though, and you want to tag gods with this ability whenever you can, just typically not in the middle of a fight. The cast time is pretty long and you're kind of just standing there, so you really only want to use this ability at the start of fights or to finish someone off to apply the slow and just start slapping. You'll never want to stop what you're doing just to place down the honey in mid-fight other than at maximum range. Speaking of which, the duration of this ability is actually determined by how long it takes you to place down all the honey available to you. So just a quick swipe will put down as much honey as you fiddling about in the area size. So remember, just one swift motion while casting so you're not stuck in that forever. Also, while being chased down, never forget to leave a trail of honey behind you, as casting it has no negative effect on your movement speed. Now AMC I'm sure is starting to make sense. Slowly start placing highs to get good coverage of your current area, you 3-2 the wave to clear it, and if anyone steps out of line, you 3 them and get a few basic attacks in to extend your passive damage. So let's put the final piece of the puzzle on this and talk about his ultimate. AMC fires an extremely, and I mean extremely high damaging stinger. This stinger will pass through minions but not walls, and will stop when the first enemy got hit. When struck with the stinger, the affected enemy is crippled as well as slowed, and even has their physical protections reduced by a flat 10%. And lastly, of course, is afflicted with this passive. After 3 seconds or upon the target's death, the stinger pops out of the target, and picking up the stinger reduces the ability's cooldown by a mega 60%. This is clearly AMC's all-in tool, and he needs to hit it unless he's crazy far ahead in order to get kills. Fortunately though, it's very easy to hit. Honestly, the number one time I miss it is when I overcorrect myself forgetting how fast the projectile comes out. You really just look at your target and that's your lot. You really never need to lead your shot with this ability whatsoever. And really that's as complex as it gets. You either use it to start a fight for that slow and cripple, or save it as your big finishing move, using the fact that it's up as a psychological tactic, as in making them hold on to things such as their beads and aegis, as well as their movement ability since they want to save them for your ultimate. Instead, you hold on to it as a finishing move. And to be honest, in the late game, it's almost exclusively just there as a tool to pin people down and finish them off. You really don't want to save it as a finisher unless you're totally steamrolling a fight. You need to get in there and make sure you apply that crazy damage. Speaking of crazy damage, some combos. Since these combos are always optimal, just assume you have a hive right around the corner, which, not to sound like a broken record, you probably should. 3-2 basic attacks for a swift combo. Then if there are no minions, go for a 3 basic attack, 2 basic, then basic some more. These are your go-tos for simple trades. Then to all in, 3, 4 basic, 2 basic attacks, and then try to pick up the stinger even if it didn't result in a kill. Then in the late game, 4 basic attacks. As they start reaching the injury range, 3 of them for the slow and start slacking again. For ability leveling, you want your 2 at level 1, your 3 at level 2, and your 1 at level 3. From there you want to max your 3, then your 1, then your 2, leveling the ult whenever you can. You can get more efficient with it and place about 3 levels into your 3, then start maxing your 1 since 3-2 is a potent enough wave clear. But to keep things simple, you can just go with 4-3-1-2, and that's just fine. Making an AMC guide is difficult. Since his mechanics are so brutally simple, playing AMC really comes down to 2 main factors. Your own self-awareness so that you know when to go for all-ins and one-on-one, which you will almost always win by the way, and when you know it's just best to kick back and power farm because you know all junglers need to do is sit on their keyboard and you will disappear. So really, AMC is all about positioning yourself and making good decisions long before anything bad happens to you. If you make a borderline bad or straight up bad decision and walk too far up without wards, don't read your lane opponent's body language well enough, and boom, you're ganked. Most hunters have tools they can use to avoid getting demolished every time this happens. You can Apollo ult or Mez yourself. Artemis, another hunter with no movement ability, still has her CC immune ultimate which stuns to Beal for herself. On AMC, you have absolutely none of that, and that's what makes him so hard. And what made him better in the mid lane, since all you really have to do there is power farm till you're so strong just no one can outdamage you. Not to mention having both your support and your jungler nearby for assistance. Also, understanding what made him good for a majority of this season, despite this negativity, is important as well. He got a series of buffs in Season 8 which mostly fell on deaf ears. However, after numerous changes to mages and mage items this season, that, with the help of the Transcendence build being so good, led to more and more favorability to hunters in the mid lane. And who has easily the best clear of all the hunters? AMC. So despite that fragility, AMC was a great choice since he could get that insane Transcendence build online so quickly, and led to him being so farmed up by the time teamfights started happening that he didn't have to worry about getting dogpiled so much since he himself did so much damage. So essentially, he had the perfect storm of weak mages, a strong build for himself, and those pre-existing heavy buffs from the previous season. Unfortunately, as a result of this, he has essentially had all the buffs given to him over the past few years stripped off within a few months, leaving him in a pretty weird state. I'd say AMC is about even in ADC and mid lane roles, although I'd say since the mid lane is safer, that's why I'd play him first. And trust me, I'm not trying to convince you not to play AMC. I think he's easily one of the most fun hunters in the game, but he's also by far and away the most fragile. So while it's fun to learn him and you'll be equipping yourself with a very fun god in your arsenal, I do think all this leads me to say that AMC isn't required learning if you're an aspiring ADC. That's about all I have for AMC for now. Thanks for watching. Hey everybody, welcome. That was a bad one.